We live in a day and age where trust in institutions, in my opinion, is at an all-time low. And who can blame the taxpayer when they pay taxes to the federal government and they assume that these three-letter agencies in the military are handling business and so they can go about their day working hard and still paying taxes? But none of that's happening. A lot of the people who run these three-letter agencies wouldn't be qualified to run a McDonald's, and yet they're in charge. Think of the last 2 years. The incompetence you've seen is astronomical, whether it's the withdrawal in Afghanistan with the military, or the fact that we had a Chinese spy balloon flying across the whole continental United States that no one talked about until people saw it with their own two eyes. You have the CDC who has flip flop back and forth on their guidelines. You've had people like the SEC who m- is meeting with Sam Bankman Fried. And so people think, well, FTX must be on the up and up. Oh, psych. No, he's not. He's a giant Ponzi scheme. You have the Fed who said, hey, it's transitory inflation. It's transitory inflation. And we're not even thinking about raising rates. Whoops, actually, we're going to raise rates faster than we ever have in history. And now you have the EPA. And this, what has happened in Ohio, in East Palestine, you wonder why people come up with theories about what's going on because they don't trust the government. And I wonder why. It's not hard. What bothers me is like people, no matter what the government says, they say, well, they must be telling the truth, no matter how often they're lied to. So now the EPA is kind of like pussyfooting around, like maybe it's really not that big of a deal. Um, and you have heads of the Department of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, who's talking about how highways are racist. Meanwhile, one of the biggest ecological bio disasters in the United States is happening. Yeah. Anyways, so this article from Zero Hedge kind of breaks it down, and I want to go through it. People in East Palestine are worried, and why would they be worried? Because they have that warm blanket of the government who's in control of all this, so they shouldn't be worried. Well, they had a massive black mushroom cloud coming from this train derailment. And I'm sure you guys have all heard of this, and I'm going to kind of break down what the latest is. But if you were to see that mushroom cloud in your town, would you go, huh, nothing to worry about here? Or would you have some questions? And when you ask those questions, if the people in charge don't seem to know what they're talking about, would you be even more concerned? Yes, you would. Okay. So, reading from the article here, there's already an effort by lawmakers on Capitol Hill and federal agencies to investigate the derailment, according to Epoch Times. Key committees in Republican-controlled House are holding their peace as investigations of the derailment and its environmental impact proceed. Meanwhile, people in East Palestine are growing horns out of their back. It's just like, well, we'll investigate, and in 3 years we'll let you know. Turns out, um, it's really bad, and you probably all have cancer. You know, a spokesperson from the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, led by Chairman Sam Graves, said the committee is talking about the National Transportation Safety Board and the Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration, and railroad involved in Norfolk Southern, which is the company that was running the railroad at the time. Now, there's footage of this train derailment or the actual train being on fire 20 miles prior. See that? That's kind of noticeable. So this was 20 miles prior to when it was actually detected. They have these heat sensors on the railroad itself, but apparently it didn't notify the conductor until a mile prior. So there seems to be some fail safes that are failing, potentially weren't updated. Whose fault is that? Um, Maybe the company, maybe the fact that we have these organizations in the government who we pay to check on this kind of stuff and they're worried about the highways being racist. I don't know. All right, further reading here. As investigators pinpoint the likely cause of the derailment, the environmental impact of the controlled burn of 20 rail cars that contained toxic chemicals, including vinyl chloride, ethoxyl acrylate, and isobutylene, has been released and described as a chemical nuclear bomb that has contaminated the town and the surrounding communities. Now, oh, no, 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 no. You're being hyperbolic. People in the town, they've just been filming dead animals in the creek, frogs, fish. And yes, this could be hyperbolic, but there's a reason people don't trust the government because they've been lied to so many times and the incompetence is so evident to their own two eyes. They go, you don't have your number one concern isn't my safety. Your number one concern is covering your ass or money. It has nothing to do with me. And I don't blame these people. This is a local news story.
So I walked up to the cage and this is what I found.
Amanda Brashears was going to feed her 5 hens and rooster this morning when she discovered them all lifeless, practically in the same position, with no signs of a predator entering their enclosure.
I'm beyond upset and quite panicked because they may be just chickens, but they're family.
Brashears says her chickens were alive and well yesterday. She believes the smell following the detonation of the train carrying chemicals that derailed in East Palestine is to blame for her birds' sudden death.
My video camera footage shows my chickens were perfectly fine before they started this burn. And as soon as they started the burn, my chickens slowed down and they died. If it can do this to chickens in one night, imagine what it's going to do to us in 20 years.
Yeah. And there's really no way of knowing. There isn't. You know, like a lot of these effects take years to take hold, and you can develop liver cancer, what have you, which I saw was one of the byproducts of this. And, 20 years down the road, who's to know that it was tied to this? Further reading, people in East Palestine and surrounding communities have reported various symptoms they can't explain since the burn, according to News 5 Cleveland. Therese Vigilati said she hasn't felt right since the controlled release and burn after train cars derailed more than a week ago. She sent a picture of her tongue. I noticed my lips were numb, the soft palate of my mouth was numb, my tongue was burning, and my throat was burning, Vigiliati said. She asked her biggest concern was, I'm not going to get cancer and die, Vigilati said. Vigilati doesn't live in East Palestine, but rather 15 miles north of the derailment site in Poland, Ohio. And the prevailing winds are taking this controlled burn, well, let's just call it a burn, it's not really controlled, up northeast. The aftermath of the Ohio woman details that she said said it is from acid rain. This is a lot of people saw like droplets that were drying on their car that looked very odd compared to what normal rain looks like. This is an East Palestine resident.
What would you want the country to know if you could inform them what's going on here?
Just pray for us. Pray for not me in particular because it didn't affect us, but I know there's a lot of people that are very, very scared. Mm-hmm. They're very nervous about what they're coming home to, the environment, the animals. Years from now, the environmental impact on just people and animals and things around town, just the economy of our small town. But God is in control. He's in control. And I think so often we forget that he is in control, that he knew this before it even happened. And not a good way to get your name on the map in international coverage, because it has been, but it's just been very trying, especially for those downtown, and those that have been basically affected by this. But just pray for our small town. I mean, not what we want to be known as,
Yeah.
but just the chemicals and stuff and the effects of years to come as to what's going to come up. Um, but God's got this. God's in control. He's a good God, and He will take care of us. So
You got to wonder, these people had a Q&A scheduled with the town council, and that was canceled. The reason is, I think, they don't know the answers to their questions. How are they supposed to know what the effects of burning vinyl chloride are? And there's a video here at the end I'll show you. I think it's a chemist that kind of explains what the side effects of burning vinyl chloride. These are people in the town that are protesting. This is from Rebel News.
Who do you think is responsible, or who do you think is to blame for what's happened here?
It's hard to say. From what we have heard, the railroad and the EPA, and apparently we just learned the military, agreed that it was proper to blow up the chemicals. So possibly all of them should be held responsible.
And yourself, who do you think is to blame here?
Well, from what I heard, it was poor maintenance on the equipment. So, it really falls on the railroad for non-maintaining their equipment. And then the mismanagement of cleanup is, the next blame. The EPA, they've made the final rules of what to do. But I believe that, unfortunately, the EPA was probably paid for. They were paid off to say this is the best route. We can open up and get our product moving again, and that's all they're really concerned about. It's not us. It's
the railroad
moving the money.
Now, why would he say that? I don't know. Everything we've watched the last 2 years, and guess what? You're paying for it. That's the most insidious thing. It's like, we pay taxes assuming that these people have our best interest in mind, and really it's just a mafia shakedown. So frustrating. This is a reporter on the ground in East Palestine.
So I'm by the train tracks roughly, I think, where the spill happened, because it stinks out here. I tried to pull in here and it says road closed. There's trucks over here. There's a bunch of trucks like blocking it. The trains, you see the trains crossing over there? There's a lot of people around here. When I tried to pull in here where it says road closed, they didn't let me. They just waved me away. And it definitely smells over here. There it is. There's trains over, that's where the train's going. It smells weird over here for sure. And there's a lot of people down there. You see a lot of workers. I don't know if they're with the EPA or what. But that is definitely where the train is. And it stinks over here. And you see all these trucks over here. Not sure if they have anything to do with it. You got this guy over here with his home. He waved. Nice people. Nice people. They don't deserve to be nuked with toxic chemicals. This is crazy. There should be so much outrage everywhere about this. It's absurd. And it stinks out here. Like, man, people just don't deserve to get nuked with toxic chemicals just because railroad companies make an error by not checking their trains to make sure they're safe. They go off, they derail, and then, the only way we can get business back for our $55 billion business is for us to blow it up and just ruin a whole city of like 3,000 people. If there's something we should do like a give, send, go, and get every house here, 2,000 houses, whatever it is, or for the whole city, like reverse osmosis water, so that their next generation of people don't grow legs out of their head. Okay, that is what we should be doing. We should be raising money for that. How about that? Is that a good start? All right, I'm covering more in a little bit.
Remember back a couple months ago, the Biden administration, there was a big argument between the unions and the railroad. And the Biden administration was kind of like, well, by law, we can't shut down the railroad because for reasons and stuff. So we're going to side with the railroad. Money. Follow the money. And again, these people, they have a natural distrust for what they're being told. I think because we've gotten to this point where corruption is so deep, there's so many people who have a job, a responsibility in the government, and maybe that job is important, maybe it's not, but because that job exists, people think that it's being taken care of. People think that they don't need to worry about um, Chinese spy balloons because that's what the military's job is. They don't need to worry about being poisoned because there's a 3-letter agency that actually does that. And meanwhile, they've been lied to over and over again. The priorities at these agencies seems to not align with American safety. And even though they perceive this, the news will tell them it's all in your head. So take a look at the waterways here. These toxic chemicals have been identified in the Ohio River, East Palestine right here, which supplies over 5 million people with drinking water, according to the local news WLWT. So obviously this network of rivers supplies millions, hundreds of millions of people with water. And this one's really interesting. This guy, apparently, he knows a little bit about vinyl chloride, and he gives his perspective here.
Used in like everything. The other thing about vinyl chloride is that it boils at 8 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's shipped in its liquid form, meaning that when these trains crashed and these started leaking, they weren't just leaking liquid, but they were spewing boiling gas. So vinyl chloride is really toxic. OSHA has the permissible limit of how much you can be exposed to it during an 8-hour shift as a 1 ppm part per million, average over 8 hours. So prior to this, the biggest spill of this chemical was in New Jersey, where one train car and about 23,000 gallons of vinyl chloride were spilled, but it didn't catch on fire. Now, this crash in Ohio has 5 train cars. These kinds of tanker cars can carry between 25 and 33,000 gallons. Let's call it 250 to 250,000 pounds of vinyl chloride. That's per train car, 5 train cars. There's maybe 1 million pounds of this toxic chemical spilling into the ground and also boiling off into the air. But then it caught on fire. I think this is where the reporting is really bad because no one is mentioning what the byproduct of vinyl chloride burning is. Of the many byproducts of burning vinyl chloride, one of them is hydrogen chloride. Hydrogen chloride is really unstable and latches onto water, like just water vapor in the atmosphere, and that turns into hydrochloric acid. So right now, government officials from the railroad, both the governor of Pennsylvania and Ohio, are calling burning off the 1 million pounds of this stuff a success, but not mentioning that it means that we have hundreds of thousands of pounds of acid in the air, potentially. Now, ever since engineering school, I've studied a lot of industrial accidents. I just find it really fascinating, and organizations like the Chemical Safety Board, NTSB, and OSHA all have like really good reports available to the public. I think as a designer, it's really good to learn about mistakes. When looking at these kinds of industrial disasters across time, there are a couple things that are pretty universal across all of them. One, the responsible party, in this case, Norfolk Southern Railway, always plays down the reality of the situation. Politicians also just repeat the same lines, and then news outlets just repeat the same. So all we're hearing is the responsible party's word.
Now, why would Norfolk Southern lie to us? Because it's going to cost them a lot of money. All right, about 60 miles south of the city in Steubenville detected butyl acrylate in the water intake, the same toxic chemical found in East Palestine, according to the local news. So they're detecting some of these chemicals in water sources 60 miles south. It says here, recall the Biden administration and other federal officials were silent about the derailment for more than a week. This week, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg finally spoke about the incident. It's like, what is this guy's qualification again? It's just, the incompetence is so palpable. And it's like, I've said this about the military too. You don't see the consequences of constant changing of the guard until you lose a war. And then all of a sudden, or something really bad happens. And then all of a sudden people are like, Hey, this incompetence has been going on for a decade. And the same thing goes for these like 3-letter organizations. Like people at the head of this, Pete Buttigieg, for example, is talking about highways being racist. Can't make it up. Here at the bottom it says, as for Norfolk Southern, they expect to rack up tens of millions of dollars in costs associated with the cleanup and lawsuits. I've had discussions with some of the people who live right near the ground zero who are hesitant to come back. There are people with young children, they don't know what the effects are going to have. James Wise, a local attorney, who filed a class action lawsuit against the railroad on behalf of some residents, told Bloomberg. And you would never guess who one of the biggest shareholders of Norfolk Southern are. The ESG pusher, BlackRock. No. It's just... Folks, I think the through line with all this stuff you're seeing, you're just I posted a meme the other day. It was my parents in their 30s. Let's buy a house and have some kids. Me in my 30s. Another chapter in Revelations happened today. It was just like, there seems to be a lot of bad stuff happening all at the same time. Some people assume it's orchestrated. Some people assume it's incompetence. I kind of lean towards incompetence. Potentially orchestrated. I don't rule that out. But what I'm getting at, I think the through line is the people in the government, their interests don't align with yours. And you pay them for their interests not to be aligned with yours. Isn't that sad? So whether it's the SEC, the EPA, the CDC, the military, right now, their concerns don't align with those of the American people, in my humble opinion. And that's why when people see disasters like this, they assume they're being lied to. And that's a fair assumption because they've been lied to over and over again. Who knows what the downstream effects, no pun intended, will be of this? Who knows if these people in East Palestine and surrounding areas will develop side effects due to this mushroom cloud of burning. But one thing I do know is the people in charge don't know what they're doing. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. See you guys in the next one. Peace.